Hey, 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 everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Grossman Files. Hey, we got a great one for you today, guys. Yes. We are starting a new series today, one that came out of the blue, actually, one that I didn't expect. I thought this was just going to be for personal use, personal research, personal fun. But I decided that what I was seeing this last day was so important, so good, that I just had to build a series out of it. And what are we talking about? We are talking about the archives of Wendy Savino. Yes. So hope everybody's doing well out there. It's great to see all y'all out there in Son of Sam land. I can't wait to get to today's information. And today is part one, actually, of, well, I really don't know how many how many episodes this is going to be. This could be 5, 4, 7. It really all kind of depends on the interest, of course, and also the material. And as I'm the kind of person that sort of lives life day to day, so I really don't know what's going to come next. But we have a show today, and we're definitely going to have another couple ones. So everyone, strap yourselves in because you're in for some fun. All right. So, how did this come about? Well, as you guys know, in the Savino video that Lorenzo and I filmed in May, you caught glimpses of all of the newspapers that Wendy had in her living room there. Really just had been stored untouched for years, apparently in a garage. Just were moved up to the new place that she's staying at. Kind of put in a hidden corner and forgotten, sort of like this story, although it was ever present in their lives. But after a while, the family kind of realized, like, we got to move on. In a way, no one seems to be believing us anyway, so let's put these in the back of the garage and move on in life. And so Lorenzo and I came across them, and we actually used one of the things that we found in our methodology and our thinking about this, of course, after we met Wendy, and that was the whole issue of Berkowitz and guns. So Berkowitz, of course, did the Savino shooting with a 32, not a 44 again. And whoop-de-doo. I mean, so what? This guy, I mean, if you believe that he only used the 44, that out of all the guns in the world, especially all the guns that he owns, because remember, they found him with an arsenal, and we're going to see some pictures of that arsenal today. He couldn't use another gun. If you just believe that, you're believing you're believing the spiritually sick mythology of the equally spiritually sick Rupert Murdoch, who put out this bunk in the 1970s. And actually, as we look at these articles in this series, we're going to see the fear ramping up, because we're going to take this from the beginning. Anybody remember that song by ELP? We're going to take this from the beginning, and we're going to kind of experience the what New York City experienced, in a sense, with the ramping up of the fear. But the whole notion that he only used a 44 is ridiculous. Again, you have to free your mind. I understand if you don't like me personally, that you're having an issue with this story, but you can't let that cloud your mind if you're a true researcher of Son of Sam, and if you're a true student of the lover of the truth. Because Berkowitz shot Wendy with a 32. So therefore, you have to deal with that. And the only way that you can deal with that in the real world as presently constituted is you just have to realize he had other guns. So getting back to the newspapers, we remember that we saw that picture of the letter that Berkey wrote. I don't know who it was, maybe Jeff Hartenberg or Lenny Dapolito, one of those two, about all the guns he could buy in Louisiana. This guy was like a kid in a candy store. He was talking about, oh, I can buy a police department issue grade shotgun, 12 gauge. It's only $79. What a bargain. Hey, you want me to get you some guns? They have pistols. They have rifles. This dude could have gotten a 32 anywhere. His father could have owned the gun, for crying out loud, as protection for his business. If you think a cab driver in New York City couldn't get a gun in 1976, you're out of your minds. You're living in Maury Terry land. That's where you're living. So anyway, Mike and I, we realized that this newspaper archive was important. Now, caveat, the research has already been done. We've not only proven that Berkowitz was the lone shooter, but also we have proven to our satisfaction the Savino shooting as well. The research is done. We're not using newspapers to do research or to convict anyone. What we're doing with this is we're having fun with history. We're going to be commenting on the sociology. We're going to be looking at these articles and commenting on the writing styles and the information that they put in. And maybe there will be some things that we learn that are new that will challenge us, and maybe we have to do further research. But we're not taking this as like, these are newspaper articles that are true, and this is all new information about Son of Sam that you never knew about. No, what this is a fun look back into history with this unique perspective given to us as a gift from the gods of the first known victim of Son of Sam, still with us alive today, part of the family, engaged with what's happening, and giving us this amazing resource of the articles that she collected over the years, because she always knew it was David Berkowitz. And it's actually quite eerie. The first article, one of the first articles that I found at the bottom of the pile, implying that they're the oldest, and we'll see them today. So actually, we got quite a bit to do today. I don't know exactly how long this might be. A long show, it might be a short show, but we got quite a bit to do today, so we might as well just get into it. But again, the whole point of this new series, the Wendy Savino Archives, is to go through, and you can see a little bit here. These are the newspapers. Again, is to go through this beautiful old archive of stuff. I mean, as we see Wendy here in this thumbnail, she has the old Newsweek article, The Sick World of Son of Sam. It's 8 pages. I haven't even read it. This unbelievably salacious True Detective magazine, How Mistakes Trap the Son of Sam, and so on and so forth, as we see today's thumbnail. But of course, here is the woman of the hour, Wendy Savino. And again, Wendy Savino is the only Son of Sam victim who is like most open book. She is engaged. She's part of this. She's giving us archival material. She's sharing these wonderful photographs. We don't have photographs like this of any other Son of Sam victim. This is a historical gift. So we see here she won the 1959 Isle of Man scooter race, International Motor or something or other. I'm not quite sure. I have no idea who this dude is back here. But here is Wendy in 1959. Absolutely beautiful. And we could see that, her right there. So she was really a very cool person, riding a motor scooter. I mean, this is cool stuff. I'm not sure when this was, but I'm not even sure what this is. But here's Wendy and her, I don't know what you would say, co-star. I'm not quite sure what you would call that. Her fellow dancer, not for Ficus, Courtenay and Company. And here they are back in the day. Interestingly enough, she showed me a picture yesterday. I don't have it here. Of her friend who was the body double for Carrie Fisher in Return of the Jedi, in the famous scene on the skiff with that amazing costume that Princess Leia wore. So there was this great picture of her and her friend and Carrie Fisher next to each other, wearing the same. It was taken on set, wearing the same costume. And I said to Wendy, I said, you don't know how important that costume was for me in my as a young child in my life. But we won't get into that, of course. But and so I told her about my Return of the Jedi connection, and it's not a direct one, but just showing 6 degrees of separation. When I was an intern at Wave Hill, I worked with a girl whose last name was Marquand, and her father was, I think his name was Richard Marquand. Anyway, he had directed Return of the Jedi. And the reason why I knew that is because she came into work one day with a shirt that said Revenge of the Jedi. It was very vintage. It was an old t-shirt. And I said, Revenge of the Jedi. She goes, yeah, Return of the Jedi was originally going to be called Revenge of the Jedi, but they changed it because Jedis don't get revenge. That concept wasn't part of the Jedi ethos. So they put it Return of the Jedi. So that led to them like, oh, well, how do you know that? Oh, my father directed it. Anyway, so that's a kind of an interesting 6 degree of separation between me and Wendy of this Return of the Jedi connection. So I don't know. I thought that was kind of cool. So anyway, as we mosey on along, here's more pictures of Wendy with the motor scooter at the Isle of Man. Here with her friend. And of course, when Wendy was shot by Berkowitz, she was 38, thereby, of course, smashing the other myth of Son of Sam, that he had a chosen age of his victims. I'd like to just ask the audience for a second if it makes logical sense. Was Berkowitz walking around New York City with the New York City birth certificate record? She's 18. Okay, she's within my age range. When are you going to understand that Berkowitz was a stalking sniper who considered Son of Sam his job, who went out almost every night in his car, stalking the streets of New York City? And if you were in the wrong place at the wrong time, it didn't matter if you were young, old, women, man, long hair, short hair, brunette, long hair, brunette, blonde, on a porch, on a stoop, in a car, in a lover's lane. It didn't matter. If you were in the wrong place at the wrong time when Disco Dave came into your realm, he was going to shoot you. And you were either going to get wounded or you were going to get killed. Those were the only two choices. And there are probably 50 or 60 people walking around New York City right now, or in the world right now, who would have been victims of his if the circumstances were correct. But they weren't. So anyway, exactly, Gary. His criteria was who we could ambush, plain and simple. That's it. There's nothing really too complex about this. Wendy's car was parked in the back of a parking lot, almost 50 feet off of the street. Here she is in her go-kart. Yo, these go-karts were cool. My cousin had one of these back in the early 80s. I was the king of that go-kart. You don't know how much I wanted one of these, but here in Riverdale, it would not have worked on these streets. I would have gotten killed. So here's the just part of the archive. And of course, these are all vintage paper. Some of them are actually collector's items. And I have them all now in sequential order, and I'm going to scan them in sequential order, and everything in this series is going to be like I like to roll, which is organized from start to finish with a central narrative that's always at the core of what we do. So some of these are super cool. I mean, look at this. So we're going to get into Maury Terry in some of these, because in some of these articles is how Maury Terry invented his whole, he used some of the information in these articles to invent his theory of accomplices. And we're going to see evidence of that, particularly in this issue after the Placido Lupo shooting, which we just had the anniversary of. But look at the cover of this. Wow. I mean, look at I mean, this girl's like wearing no clothes. So anyhow, interesting stuff. Bad Dream with Nat Berkowitz. And of course, the Voskerichian with the ski cap, and where in the article, Maury has us think that this is a suspect. In the article, they clearly say that they thought this was just a teenager running away from the scene of the crime, like nervous. They didn't consider him a suspect. This is, of course, the Berkowitz lookalike on the Voskerichian scene. Looks almost exactly like Wendy's sketch. So there's a lot of cool stuff in this archive, guys, and we're gonna take it slow for however many episodes it takes of this series to do it justice. Because as you know, I like to be the clearinghouse of sober Son of Sam information. We don't insult your intelligence here, talking about Maury Terry like this guy was a dogged and honest journalist. If you're still on that trip, you're out of your mind. I mean, that's just basically the long and short of it. And Wendy was a victim of Maury Terry too, and we're going to learn more about that in an upcoming episode of the Wendy Savino archives. So there's a lot of cool stuff in these. This is just a smattering of things. Here's Berkowitz, the model. I mean, look at this guy. Look how he's posing. Cross over here. Remember, this guy's Christianity is a total sham. His Christian friends are nothing but aiders and abettors, right? That's all they are. They're actually fan clubs of a serial killer. These guys worship and love a serial killer. They're all sick and venal. And this dude's over here modeling. This is the true Berkowitz. And his Christianity is a sham because he's been a Christian 3 times already. Yeah, I know you know about the popular one in 1988 where a person tapped his shoulder and said, "David, God loves you." And then he went and read the Bible and cried all night long and all that kind of crap. That was his 3rd time, meaning that he was a Christian and then rejected it 2 times before. And of course, we know that his Christianity in 1974 that alarmed his friends. They thought he had become mentally ill with this stuff. That was a complete sham. He later wrote to Dr. Abramson about how he was going to church and then going back home and jerking off, thinking about church and all this stuff. I mean, this was a really sick dude. And then, of course, he had to rescind that Christianity because he went on to stab Michelle Foreman, allegedly stab someone else, allegedly shoot several people in Yonkers. Then we have the Wendy Savino shooting. Then we have Donna Lauria and the rest of the Son of Sam shooting. So how much of a Christian? how that's not Christian, right? Like going out and shooting people is not Christian. And then, of course, we have another conversion right after his arrest where he became Christian, and he writes about this. He writes about this in his letters to Abramson and his letters to his family at the time, talking about, "Oh, I'm a born again Christian." Well, he must have rescinded that too. And then, of course, he becomes a famous Christian in 1988, and then he starts the whole Maury Terry grift. And then Christianity is a perfect ruse for this sociopathic, narcissistic, manipulative killer to get his message out to the people of the world, because that's how he still thinks. And this is how he carefully curates his message. Notice that he doesn't talk to me. Notice that he would never sit in a room for an interview with me and Mike Lorenzo. Right? Like, that's not going to happen. And there's a good reason for that. And the reason for that is because we know who this guy is. So anyway, here's the narcissist. "Oh, I'm a Christian." So I pieced these together from an inside. This is from one of the issues of where he was caught. These are the photographs that were taken by those New York Post photographers that were arrested. So these are different from the ones that were in the People First David Berkowitz. See, even here, like the 44 caliber killer's bed, right? They're putting into your mind the media myths, which you're all still infected with if you're still one of these people who believes the spiritually sick Rupert Murdoch and his whole notion of the 44 caliber killer. I mean, that guy didn't exist. You should have called him the grinning gunman, because that was the more accurate description, because he shot Wendy with a 32. So he wasn't just the 44 caliber killer. So these are more pictures. These are the ones that the Post photographer took. Robert Kalfas. "God save us from Craig Glassman." So Dustin says it's funny. Criminals only find Christ when they realize, yeah, exactly. I mean, it's a great scam to run in prison. I mean, I'm just going to put it this way. Uh, Just look at yourselves and you just have to be honest with yourself. You're the same person you were when you were 7 years old, give or take, having learned a few things of wisdom, how to control yourself in social situations, learning how to control your tongue, learning how to get along interpersonally with people. But you're essentially the same as you were when you were 7. I am, you are, your parents are. That's why we all kind of should be more nice to each other and forgive each other more, because we're all essentially children. Even though we're all in adult bodies, I still feel exactly like I did, with little exceptions, when I was in my 20s. So the point is, Berkowitz is the same as he always was. He hasn't changed either. Okay. And if you're like, oh, he didn't admit shooting Wendy, so that means he didn't do it. He, at one point, he denied shooting almost every victim. So it means nothing. All right. So anyway, these are this, and we'll get into a much deeper analysis of this type of stuff later. Today's article today, we're going to really deep dive into the first articles, because we're going to start from the beginning. Excuse me. So Super Strike saying Berkey only loves God because God forgives all and would be only one forgive. I take it a little bit further to narcissism. He forgave himself. I mean, let's just face it. I was on Frank Morano's Other Side of Midnight last week. Ruby, if you're in the chat, please put up the link for people. And I made that point, that it's very easy to forgive yourself. I can forgive myself for all sorts of things. It doesn't really make it right in the real world. So anyway, all right. So getting back to the presentation, this is an interesting 2-page spread, because it says a bunch of things that are apropos of Wendy. There was a smile on the man's face, a smile that seemed to say smugly, "See, I'm not so bad," but with a hint that he didn't really believe. So there they are. The smile is what was made national news headlines in bold font and print the day after his arrest. Smile was put here twice, that word. And of course, that word is huge in Wendy's case as well. And this is a great picture because it shows the arsenal. So here, Mayor Beam and cops show reporters guns and ammunition seized in Berkowitz's apartment and car. So there's the rifle, there's the shotgun. I wonder if this stuff still exists somewhere in NYPD archives. That would be unbelievable. You'd think that one of these detectives would have said, we need to protect this stuff because he might have other victims. So let's put this stuff into deep storage and really good protection, because this is a major criminal and he may have other victims. Let's put this stuff in storage. I really hope that that's true. And there's, of course, his smile, and this is the face that, give or take, Wendy saw. And of course, there we can see the same hairstyle, the short, slick back hair, with a fairly pronounced widow's peak area. I must admit that the widow's peak isn't the hugest thing, but those things mean nothing to me. The blue eyes, the rosebud mouth, and the smile. Detective's ego with one of the killer's guns. So this must be the machine gun the 45. This must be what he shot Harvey with, because I think this is the 45. All right, so let's go back to the beginning with all this, and we'll just sort of ease on into the material. We're not going to do too much at once, because I don't want to make these shows inordinately long, but we are going to give everything full attention, because for many people, this is going to be the only place you see this. I'll put these articles up on my private Facebook. Hold on one second. group. And if anybody's really interested, I can send them to you. But anyway, the beginning. So I didn't know that the Wendy's case made the New York Post. It was front page. I thought it was like a, because it happened in the North Bronx, and I didn't realize it made such big news. So here's the New York Post from April 10th, 1976. Exec's wife shot, finds suspect slain. Now, here's what's interesting about this whole thing, and it's all about media narratives and why you cannot trust newspaper articles as firsthand primary sources of information, because they were going with the mafia angle. They had the guy's name Savino. It was 1976. It was the Bronx. He was an ex-cop. He was politically connected. They immediately went with the Joseph Messina angle, the mob hitman that was found dead a few hours later, and a few miles away, but who was actually ruled out unequivocally the next day because he had a mustache, and Berkowitz didn't have a mustache. So the suspect they're referring to here is Messina, and they're talking about like this whole mob angle. And that's why the whole issue of eyewitnesses came in, because they were trying to push stuff into a certain narrative, which just didn't work in this case. They had no way to explain this case. It was kind of unprecedented. Remember that stranger motiveless shootings are rare. The modus operandi of the Savino shooting, which was exactly like a Berkowitz shooting of a lone gunman going up to a relatively dark and secluded area and shooting at close range inside a car. That's very rare too. And here you have this happening in the North Bronx. It's unprecedented. There was a lot of crime going on, yes, but it was like gang related. It was this idiot shooting that idiot on the street. This whole issue of motiveless stranger crimes of the dude going up and shooting into a parked car at close range was not happening in New York City. It was extremely rare. Any police will tell you that. And of course, this happened in the same neighborhood Berkowitz lived in the same kill zone, in the same time period. The sketch was the identical twin. And the only incident that happens that's even remotely related to it is the Donna Lauria shooting that happens 3 months later. So, but they were first trying to push the mob angle. So that was what this was all about, right? And of course, in the archives is a copy of, I think, this is probably a photocopy that the cops gave Wendy in 1976 of her shooter. I don't think this is the original, but this is, I think, the first generation copy of the original. And it was in her in her archives as well. So I carefully unfolded it. You can see there's pieces missing, and tried to line it up as best I could. And I mean, if you don't think that looks like Berkowitz, I suggest going to an eye doctor. So here is one of the articles from a local newspaper of her shooting. This was April 14th, 1976. It was the Bronx News, and this was sent right to Wendy at her home. And we could show this now because she no longer lives there, but also because this was printed in the newspapers at the time anyway. One of the reasons why she stayed in England and why her husband was so concerned, because they had no clue what had just happened to Wendy. And they were scared that somebody was after the family. So they sent the kids to live under an assumed name in Florida. Wendy went after her ICU in the Bronx, went right to England, stayed there. All because of, one of the reasons was because they printed the damn address in the newspaper articles. But anyway, this is the Bronx News from that time period, an original copy. And the article in here was essentially a rewrite of the New York Post article that we just saw, this one right here. And that's what another thing that I want to explain, because this series is also going to be an analysis of news making and what actually happens in newsrooms. I was not a newspaper reporter for very long, but I did work for a newspaper for 7 months, and every week I wrote, I don't know, 10 articles. I saw how it worked. I grew up in a newspaper household. My father was a journalist. He was still he did public relations for the cops, the firemen, and the sanitation men. And he would always put together their union newspapers in the house. He would do it with on this board with a light and razor blades and tape and all that. And he used to love doing that. Anyway, so I grew up around this whole world, and I know how it works. Oftentimes, especially in these little regional newspapers like the Bronx News, they'll just take the article from the New York Post and they'll just rewrite it. They might change a few words here and there, but they're just gonna rewrite it. Okay, that's just what happens. It's called the real world. So we're not going to go through every one of these. Again, smiling gunman. So Wendy was saying smiling right from the jump. Okay, she didn't make this up after seeing Berkowitz smile. She didn't know about the fact that he had smiled to Cecilia Davis. She didn't know about any of this stuff. And and one critique I've heard, which is hilarious because it's just shows the absolute lowest form of thinking. Actually, quite insulting when I tell you it. One critique of Wendy's story is, "Oh, he didn't smile at any victims." Well, how do you know that? 6 of them are dead. How could they tell you what they saw before he shot them? So Cecilia Davis, before he shot Stacy, talked about this odd smile, and she was kind of creeped out at his smile. And so smiling was the reason why I connected Berkowitz to this in the first place, and why I got in touch with Wendy and connected with her, having no idea she existed, and then just sort of like jumping into her life. I mean, this is amazing. I was with her yesterday, her and Jay, and we're still all in shock about how this all came about, because it happened very quickly, that everything was aligned, the gods were working with us. I truly feel like this is the reason why I started this video series, and I didn't know it at the time, was to do this story on Wendy Savino. And now that it's done, I'm kind of done with this topic. I actually didn't think I had any shows left in me, to be honest, but this Wendy archives are amazing, and we're going to go through it. So this article essentially just rewrites the first one, and we don't need to go through it because it gets boring reading these articles. But again, it talks about witnesses told police the gunman drove off in a car with 2 other men, apparently leaving his victim for dead. Now you're going to see how that is exactly, in this 2 gunmen driving away article, came from that New York Post article. And remember, this was written when they had no idea what was going on. They still thought that Messina was involved, and they thought this was a gangland slaying. So they just literally made this up. This did not exist. If you read the other newspaper articles, every one of them says lone gunman, and none of them talk about witnesses. I saw every police file of this case specifically looking for this, because despite what my critics think, I am actually honest. And if I had seen anything with witnesses and 2 cars and 2 men driving away, I would have dropped this, and the cops would have dropped it like a hot potato. We did not see anything like that in the police reports. And if you don't believe me, there's nothing I can do to convince you, and that's fine. I really honestly don't care. You're just going to have to take my word for it. So again, we're seeing fake news here. Witnesses said the gunman drove off in a car with 2 other men, right? And of course, remember, I asked Wendy about this, and we're going to hear what she had to say about this in this 2 or 3 minute clip right now.
If I had just laid there, I would have died. I could feel I was dying. I knew I was dying.
Was there anybody else in the parking lot? Any eyewitnesses? Anybody see anybody get into a car?
It was a dark parking lot and only me in it. Nobody was in it.
You heard the footsteps on the gravel, but there was no other witnesses screaming or anything like that in the parking lot. The only way anybody knew what had happened to you is when you, thank God, were strong enough and brave enough to go back into that restaurant and alert these people for help.
Yes.
So there's nobody else outside. There's no bystander going to help you. And there was no sound. When he was walking, you never heard like a car door open, close, and screech off.
No, I was concentrating on getting out of the car.
Right.
Once I did not hear his feet anymore.
Right.
I didn't hear anything.
You didn't hear like a car peeling out or anything like that?
No.
Okay.
Did any detectives ever tell you that there were eyewitnesses to this, or that they saw people get in a car and drive away with other people?
No.
So you see me very clearly in the interview ask her specifically about this article, because actually John Catalano sent me this article before, I guess before, I'm not quite sure when he sent me that, but I think it was after my first show on Wendy, and I don't know if he found it or someone found it, and we rightly freaked out because we were like, oh shit, eyewitnesses. So I went up there with the full intention of asking her about it. You saw me ask her about it. She said no. You saw Lorenzo ask about it every 6 way from Sunday. She said no. I'm telling you, there was nothing in the police files regarding any eyewitnesses or 2 men driving away. That's literally fake news. And should it come as a surprise that the news inserts fake stuff in it? I mean, here's some other examples, right? In the article about me, for instance, this last week, and I thought it was a fairly well done article, but the one in the New York Post, the one that says, history would not have been rewritten if not for an eagle-eyed, Berkowitz-obsessed YouTuber named Manny Grossman, who requested all of NYPD's files on the Son of Sam investigation and located the initial incident report about Savino's shooting. That's totally wrong. This did not happen this way. I had all the files from the People versus David Berkowitz, which all came from Maury Terry's initial dump. I still wonder who is really truly behind that site, because the initial dump was all of the same Maury Terry files that I got. I traced it back digitally forensically. It's the same file names. So something's up with that People versus David Berkowitz site. I'm starting to get very suspicious as to who's behind it, because it was originally all my files. So anyway, that's neither here nor there. Honestly, I couldn't care less about any of that crap. I'm on a whole different level now with this. So I already had the files. I didn't request shit from NYPD. And if I had called NYPD and said, give me your Savino files, that wouldn't have even gotten that far. They don't take calls from losers off the street asking for files. So this did not happen this way. This is a complete fake news, just exactly like this paragraph never happened in the real world as presently constituted. If you want to still believe it, that's fine. But in my world, believing fantasies, thinking they're true, and then reacting to them, that's called schizophrenia. And to be honest, I want nothing to do with that. So anyhow, so this is fake news right here, and it's about me. And I'm telling you, it's bullshit. This is bullshit. And it's not malicious BS. They didn't put this in to screw me over. They simply misinterpreted what I told them and reported it wrong. And they literally put something in here that never happened. Now, you want to also see an example of fake news? This never happened. This was a figment of the imagination of the liar, the manipulator, the bullier, the abuser, the wig wearer, the chain smoker, the not good friend, the guy who would send you 1,500 feet this way, there's any 1,500 feet that way, the spiritually sick snap suture lover, and the man whose mind was veritably obsessed and drenched with urine. Maury Terry. This dude made up this entire article and it was splashed on the front page. Billy the artist drew these, most likely. There was no satanic cult at Untermeyer linked to Son of Sam. It's actually very dodgy whether there was a satanic cult at Untermeyer at all, because it was Black Sabbath heavy metal drinking teenagers in the 70s who drew this. And everybody I spoke to who was from that era were like, we didn't know of anything happening here until Maury Terry came along. And then we heard about all this stuff happening that we had never heard of before. So the point of what I'm saying here, and this is why I never use newspaper articles as the end all be all of my work. I mean, if newspaper articles could solve crimes, why aren't detectives? Why are there police forces? Why are detectives not using the newspaper articles to solve every crime out there? But newspaper articles are fun to analyze and look at. They give us a good snapshot into the sociology of the time. So this was Satanic Panic era, the beginning of all this crap, 79. Maury Terry was trafficking in this whoosao. And they put an entire fake article on the splash on the front page of the Herald Statesman. So newspapers lie. All right. So getting back to the material. So this I found actually rather, my new favorite word is poignant, but that's a very apt word. This was written on the May 12th, 1976 Bronx News by columnist Joseph Savino Jr., who was a regular columnist. This is Wendy's husband right here, while I just grab a quick drink. And although Wendy is not written about in here, this May 12th was right in the thick of her being in the ICU at Jacoby Hospital. And so he wrote about Jacoby. So I thought this was an interesting insight into the man, because, of course, in the wake of Wendy's story coming out, everyone's going to have an opinion, right? So in certain circles, this guy is a CIA connected ultimate mobster hanging out with the Shah of Iran and involved in, that's in the same world where my father is the head of Operation Mockingbird. And because he worked for Rubenstein Associates, somehow that means something when Rubenstein Associates had like 150 employees. So anyway, this is Joseph Savino, and might as well get the words from him rather than your made up. Not that you guys are doing that, but people who can make up any sort of conspiratard theory and then run with it. Jacoby, Miracle Place. There is a place in the Bronx County that most of us will never see. It belongs to each and every one of us and is usually sought after and vied for by other than Bronx residents. In essence, it is my sincere hope that not a single one of our many readers and friends ever have to go to this magnificent institution. The knowledge that it is there should be sufficient for most of us, but this bland yet merciful operation merits much more than just our simple awareness of its very existence. I, for one, have constantly complained of unnecessarily squandered tax dollars, but as a small taxpayer, I feel gratified with any monies awarded to the intensive care unit, also known as the burn unit of Jacoby Hospital. Located on the 6th floor of the Bronx Medical Center, it is simply known as Ward 6 West. I am overwhelmed by the individual compassion and uncomparable skills afforded each and every unfortunate patient herein. If any religious sect ever wanted to elaborate on the miracle of life and death, if any group wishes to see municipal employees in constant battle with the Grim Reaper, if any person wishes to come face to face with kind benevolence, you have it all before you in this one lonely, painful corridor, just 6 floors above the everyday bustle of a Bronx street. Uniforms and procedures are different, and the names are from every walk of our ethnic America. But Jonathan Sanders, Mary Ellen Lucier, Lynette Moreland, okay, all these people, and Josephine Ellen Fogarty are the Florence Nightingales of Bronx County and should all experience inner peace for the warm and friendly atmosphere they extend each day with death looking over every shoulder. The doctors or generals fighting each day should not be forgotten. And in my opinion, Dr. Melvin Cart, Mordecai Blau, Jamie Bitran, Carlos Macabelli, Clement Ugorsi. All right, okay. And Mimi Chang will move on to happier duty stations, but I do not believe they will ever lose the peaceful gratification they must experience as one of their miracles walks out of their ward, out of their lives, probably never to be seen again. I cannot say enough about the skills of therapist Raymond Sosnowski. The patients suffer physical torments, but what about the mental distress of the family, loved ones? Who extends a hand? Who wipes a father's or husband's tear? Well, I am overcome by the administration and patient relation department and will never be able to repay the kindness of Leonard Piccoli and so on and so forth. In all my life, I have never been more impressed on a professional plane than I have with the Ward 6 West of Jacobi Hospital. And in my time of personal tragedy, I have never been more full of heart and empty of words, and I don't know what else to say except thank you. So here, that's pretty beautiful writing, and say what you want. From what I can glean, this was a very sensitive man with a heart who loved his wife. And of course, here's from the archives, Wendy's, I'm not quite sure what this is, but this is May 25th, 76. So just a 12 days after that was written. Wendy Savino, 39-year-old female, admitted to Bronx Municipal Hospital on April 9th with gunshot wounds to left chest, right eye, left cheek, left interscapular area, left forearm. So remember, she was shot 5 times. Remember, you probably don't remember, but in the New York Times article, it said she was only shot 3 times. So again, newspapers get things wrong. So right eye blind. We don't need to go through all the horrible injuries that she suffered at the hand of David Berkowitz. But that is in there. Now, this is what I find most interesting, because now we're getting into the first articles collected by the Savino family. And this tells you that right from the start of what eventually became Son of Sam, the radar went up in this family as to these incidents of random shootings in cars. And of course, that would make sense if you think about it, because Joseph Savino was an ex-detective, and he was running a private investigation firm at the time of his wife's shooting. So this was a man who was attuned to patterns of criminality and could understand that something was related to his wife's case when he saw it. Just like the detective and I don't know his name, who is the reason we're all sitting here today. The original detective who put Wendy's DD5 into Donna Lauria's case folder, because a detective in 1976 thought that Donna Lauria's case and Wendy Savino's case was related. This was not ever on the police radar, if you understand what I'm saying. At some point, somebody connected these two incidents. Somebody did connect Wendy's case to Son of Sam. And then, of course, when she told Mario Merola about it in October of 1977 and proceeded to do nothing, I think therein lies another huge aspect of this story that somebody more intelligent than I am is going to have to flesh out if there's ever any interest. But if it's possible to even flesh out the story at this point, but the relationship between Joseph Savino and Mario Merola. There had to be history there. I don't know, but one was a prominent Republican, one was a prominent Democrat. They were both ex-cops. I think something personal between those two, in addition to the other things like, well, Berkowitz is already in jail, let's not upset the apple cart, and so on and so forth. We have this media myth built up. If we introduce another shooting with another gun, it's going to get everyone crazy. Those were all considerations too. But I think that Mario Merola sat on Wendy Savino's story for deeper reasons, and I think that I still think that there's a huge part of this story that's unknown, certainly unknown by me. And I don't know if anybody who's currently alive really knows the true depths of it and if we'll ever find out, but there's something there. So I see in the chat that people are talking about Ian Gillan and Ronnie James Dio. I guess maybe you see I'm wearing a Dio shirt. Last in Line, of course, my newest favorite song, Rock and Roll Children. Good stuff. Anyway, so I'm looking at the bottom of this of the thing. This is what they gave me, right? This was what everything was in. Filled to the brim to the top with articles and clippings and newspapers and so on and so forth. And I went to the bottom because I knew the bottom was going to be where the oldest stuff was, where the first things that they collected were, because that just makes sense. You throw things in and then you throw newer stuff on top. So the stuff at the top is always newer than the stuff at the bottom. It's just logic. So I immediately just went to the bottom and I find these little clippings. So this was the first clippings that the Savino family ever, and I can't say it was Wendy because she was in England recuperating when this happened. So this must have been found here, and then this is from a New York paper. So these clippings about Donna Lauria, and it's very interesting to me because, of course, the MO with Donna Lauria was exact the same MO as Savino. Bronx girl slain in car. A teenage girl was shot dead today, and her companion was wounded when a man opened fire on them as they were talking in a car parked on a quiet Bronx street. Donna Lauria, 18, a medical technician, died instantly when she was struck in the head by one of 3 or 4 bullets fired into the vehicle by the curly-haired assailant, who then fled into the darkness without saying a word. Her companion, Jody Valenti, 19, who was hit in the thigh by one of the bullets, told police from her hospital bed she did not recognize the gunman and could give no reason for the attack. We haven't the slightest idea at this time why this happened. Now, I'm just going to comment on this. This could be the same article written about Wendy Savino. You have a person with curly hair going up and firing into a car, hitting a person in the head, fleeing into the darkness without saying a word. This could be written about Wendy's case. It's chilling, actually. And we haven't the slightest idea at this time why it happened. That's exactly what happened in Savino as well. So this is why some detective put Savino's file into Donna Lauria's case folder, because anybody could see at this time that there was something similar to these attacks. Now, here's the second part of the article. This is a little bit too small over here, so I broke it up into 2 easier things here. Okay, 1 second. Let me go back. Said one detective investigating the case. It's right up in the air. We have no suspects. We don't know who did it or why. Same thing with Savino. The shooting occurred at 1:10 a.m. as the girls were sitting in Miss Valenti's 75 blue Oldsmobile, double parked outside a 6-story building at 2860 Burr Avenue. Miss Lauria lived in a 4th-floor apartment there with her parents and 2 brothers. The building is on a quiet tree-lined street between Mayflower and Pilgrim Avenues in the neighborhood of Irish and Italian families in the Pelham Bay section. Miss Valenti lives nearby. Michael and Rose Lauria, the girls' parents, had just returned from an evening out and were still chatting on the street when the 2 girls drove up in the car, according to Donna's older brother, Michael. He said they waved at her parents, and Donna said she would be up in a minute. Reportedly, Donna got out of the car and started toward the house when she remembered something she wanted to tell Jody. She returned to the auto and got in, the brother said. Oh, isn't that interesting? I never heard of that before. We never read in any account, and I wonder whether this is accurate. Again, newspaper article. You can't take it as fact. Has any of us as a Son of Sam researcher ever heard that Donna got it out and then went back into the car? I never heard of that. Then shots rang out and the Laurias upstairs could hear Jody screaming. Police said the assailant carrying a long-barreled pistol apparently had been waiting in a car nearby. That's not true either. He appeared out of the darkness and took careful aim from the sidewalk several feet away. Sounds just like Sounds just like Wendy. Without a word, he opened fire, killing Miss Lauria. As Miss Lauria slumped backwards, another bullet struck Miss Valente in the thigh. The assailant then ran off. A woman neighbor who was asleep on a couch in her apartment on the lower floor of the apartment building was awakened by the shots and ran to a front window. I saw this girl get out of the car and start screaming, she said. She stood in the middle of the street shouting, "Help me! Help me!" Then she walked around to the other side of the car and opened the door, and the other girl fell out. At this point, she really started to scream and cry. So that's one article. And yeah, I mean, someone was worried that I don't care what you guys talk about in the chat. I mean, I'm a libertarian. I don't give a crap what people do as long as they're not harming anyone. All right. And then this was the last article that we're going to see in today's show. And this was the second article that I saw, and of course, pulled out at the same exact time period. Must have been from a different newspaper. I'm not quite sure which was from the Post or which was from the Daily News. Doesn't really matter. But this is another article on the Lauria shooting, and it could be written about Wendy's. Think about Wendy when I'm reading this and note the similarities. A man crept up to a double-parked car in front of an apartment house in the Bronx early yesterday and fired 4 shots, killing an attractive teenager and wounding her girlfriend. The assailant fled into the darkness without saying a word, leaving the wounded girl screaming hysterically. Police said that Donna Lauria, 18, of 2860 Burr Avenue, Westchester Heights, was killed when the first bullet, fired at close range, crashed through the window on the passenger side and struck her in the temple. A second bullet entered the thigh of the driver, Jody Valenti, 19. One slug ricocheted off the door, and the fourth shot was found lodged in the front seat. Detectives said they believe that the murder weapon was a .45 caliber automatic, but were not able to confirm this pending ballistics tests. See, right? So if you only read this, oh, it's a .45, therefore it's a cult. I mean, that's how the troglodytes of the world think in terms of this case. Miss Lauria's uncle, a police officer who asked that he not be identified, said she had gone with her friend to a Manhattan discotheque in Miss Valenti's mother's car, a 1974 Cutlass Oldsmobile, Wednesday night. So that's interesting because they were actually at Peachtree Disco in New Rochelle, not in Manhattan. So again, what do you make of this if you're a believer in newspaper articles, right? If you believe in newspaper articles, all of a sudden Donna Lauria is now in Manhattan in a 1974 Cutlass, whereas in this article it says a 1975 Cutlass. I think. Does it say? It doesn't say. So I was wrong about that. Anyway, 74 Cutlass. He said the girls returned to Miss Lauria's apartment house at about 12:30 a.m. and were just sitting in the car, just talking. A short while later, Miss Lauria's parents drove up, saw the girls, and chatted with them a few minutes. Her father said he was going up to get the family's dog, and they would walk him together after Miss Valenti left. While the father was upstairs in the Lauria's 4th-floor apartment, the gunman sneaked up on the girls and shot them. Miss Valenti got out of the car, went around to the other side, opened the door, and Miss Lauria's body slumped onto the pavement. At this moment, the victim's father came out of the apartment house with the dog and burst into tears when he saw his daughter's body on the ground. Miss Valenti, a nurse who lives a few blocks away, told detectives she did not recognize the killer. She said it was a white man in his late 30s and wore a blue striped shirt. Interesting. Wendy Savino's thing said 30s as well. This says late 30s. Miss Lauria had been employee for 2 years at the Empire State Ambulance Service, which has its headquarters at New York Hospital, as an emergency medical technician. So very vague. Of course, Son of Sam didn't exist. No one had any clue. Probably at this point, they were like, detectives, any smart one were like, wait a second, 3 months ago, Savino gets shot. Very similar. We have no motive there. This is basically the same exact thing happening again. And who knows what they thought? They probably thought both were botched mob hits. I know that there was rumors of them thinking that this Lauria was a mob hit, although there's no real proof of that. But in either case, this is where we're going to end today's episode of the archives of Wendy Savino. And of course, we've just scratched the surface. I mean, I've only gotten through a couple clippings. We haven't even touched on the amazing stuff. And you know what? I'm going to give you a little teaser. Let me just quickly get the folder up that I have everything in. And we can look at some fun articles that we'll look at at a later date in more detail. Let me just get up the good stuff here. Here we go. So you'll like this because this, of course, is is really interesting, especially to those of you who still think of the cult theory as real. So this was August 17th, 1977. So this was just a week after the arrest. And remember, I spoke to Chief Borelli, and he told me that immediately after the arrest, they looked into John Carr and they immediately cleared him because they had intelligence about this guy, John Carr, because of Sam Carr, and they looked into the sons. It was just simple police work. That were these two guys involved with each other? They looked into it. They found nothing right away. And it went nowhere. And of course, Borelli told me that in an email. So this is actually kind of corroborates that because in an indirect way, because here's just a week later and they're writing about accomplices and dismissing the idea of accomplices in the Son of Sam case. So Mystery Pal, Angry Sam says, I did it all alone. Accused Son of Sam killer David Berkowitz, angered by questions about a possible accomplice during the year-long murder spree, has told police, I had no partner. I did it all alone. The same thing, of course, that he told Mike Caparelli in that book. And of course, we didn't need Mike Caparelli in any way, shape, or form because we already knew that he worked alone because of the evidence. But you can see that there was talk about accomplices and the immediate aftermath. And I never saw this article before. I certainly didn't. And so this is the kind of stuff that we'll eventually look at. Berkowitz enters innocent plea. Here he is talking about other incidents, right? Confessing to stabbing. So why is it so out of the realm of possibility? Here's them talking about a woman in Yonkers who was shot from here. Look, the other attack occurred July 13th, the night of the blackout. A woman was hit with a slug from a .22 caliber rifle as she sat on the porch of her home in Yonkers. That bullet was recovered, and Vergari said he would ask ballistics compare. Blah 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 blah. So they were already talking about other victims and other shootings with other caliber weapons in the immediate aftermath. It just all went nowhere because they had their man, they put him in jail, and that was that. But there's a lot in here to discuss, and we're not taking these articles as gospel, as if everything in them is true. But these articles allow us as Son of Sam researchers to expand our base of knowledge and thereby expand the conversations we have with one another. So, true detective, right? This is the kind of trash that Berkowitz was reading and getting all titillated about before he went out and getting shot. Like this is February 1978, but look at this. I mean, this is actually spiritually sick imagery if you think about it. I'm not going to go into detail why, because it's pretty obvious what's going on here, but this is spiritually sick imagery. I mean, this is not Christian in any way, shape, or form. Right? And this is the kind of stuff that Berkowitz was reading in his teenage years and as early 20s. But this one was one that Wendy had because it's a double length special on the mistakes that trap Son of Sam. And it's all this huge articles. Actually, let's go through some of it because there's some pictures here that no one's ever seen. So this is from an English true crime magazine. And we'll go through this. Maybe we'll see excerpts of this at some point. Again, we're just showing you a smattering of what's coming in the future. We're going to talk about how Wendy was a victim of Maury Terry as well. But There's a picture of Stacy Moskowitz in here that no one's ever seen before. Right here. I think no one's seen this one. So you're going to tell me he only shot long brunette hair? All right, I think that's where we're going to leave it for today. So everyone, I want to say thank you so much for hanging in there with me. I'm not going to give too much inside baseball or insight into my own methodology, but after Wendy broke and the story made national news and she was on NBC and all this stuff and it got all this media attention, to be honest, I just crashed. It was like this pinnacle of a creative peak and just something amazing had just happened, and then it was just a crash, and I didn't want to have anything to do with the topic of Son of Sam, to be honest. TBH. Actually, I hate that term, to be honest, because when you say to be honest, does that imply that everything that everything else you're saying is a lie? I mean, never use that term, to be honest, because it actually just makes you sound worse. But no, the fact is that I was dead to this topic. I had no interest in it anymore. I didn't even want to think about it. But of course I still want to be in Wendy's life. And I was so happy to go up to her house yesterday and hang with her and Jay for a couple hours and just catch up on things and hear about her experiences since all this broke. And so once I got all these newspapers home and I started scanning them last night, I realized that there's a lot of meat here for a lot of shows, and not just shows for the sake of doing shows, but as you can see today, shows to learn more about the case, the reality of the case, also weave Wendy's story into it, because now she's a victim of Son of Sam. She's his first known. Everybody's been shifted back by one. So, and we just have to deal with that as a Son of Sam community. And so we're weaving her into the story by doing this as well, because these are her archives. And you can see how close she was to this story all these years, and how it was really, as she told us, really something that always dominated in her mind, this whole issue of how Son of Sam shot her, and just nobody would ever believe her again, because they were too infected by the myths of Son of Sam. And so it's my entire work and focus now to help shatter these myths of Son of Sam. And they need to be shattered, because myths are no good if you want to have a true way of looking at the world. You can't operate in a world based on fantasy and mythology. That's what the Maury Terry fans do. And it's not a pretty place to be, because they're just constantly going in circles, getting each other titillated over the latest spiritually sick stuff they're talking about, even though they pretend that they don't like it. They really like it. And in 40 years, they're going to be in the exact same spot, because again, they're just talking about, they might as well be reading Little Red Robin Hood and Rumpelstiltskin to each other. Talking about Satanism and druidistic activity in Untermeyer Park. I mean, can you believe that people still do this in 2024? But anyway, it's a great day in Son of Sam world, because we've just have injected all this new, fresh information, which is old information, but which has never been archived before, because quite frankly, a lot of these newspaper articles are buried deep within the paper. And I don't think anybody actually ever bothered to turn enough pages to find them, because so many of the things that I'm finding are simply not online. So we're going to all see them for the first time and hopefully have some fun and learn something as we do it. So everybody, I want to say thank you so much. And we will see you on the next episode of the Wendy Savino Archives. Thank you very much.